So basically, this workshop is going to be about specifically costume and prop design because that is my specialty. But a lot of the stuff that I talk about today can be applicable to pretty much anything that you're going to 3D print that's going to end up being finished, sanded, painted, used in kind of a visual presentational manner. So yeah, just kind of a walkthrough of what I'm going to be talking about today. Just going to give you a little bit of intro. I'm going to touch on FDM versus resin printing. I guess just real quick, I'm not really sure, just within the group we have here, how much experience people have. Is this more of a group where people have some experience 3D printing, or is this kind of but I am going to touch on FDM versus resin because I think this is something that people get a little bit confused about, specifically in costume design. So I'm going to talk about some of the pros and cons of each and just how you can make choices about what materials you're going to use. I'm going to talk about model prep, so the whole slicing process, specifically for cosplay stuff. And then I'm going to be doing a little demo of my own post-processing methods. And yeah, so at least with my audience, the biggest question I get with people is like, hey, once it's off the print bed, how do I actually turn it into something that can paint? And it's going to have a nice smooth surface. It's going to be a visual piece. So that's a little demo that I am going to do. It may have already touched about me, but it's cool. So FDM versus resin. So pigment deposition, which is I pros at least for cosplay are going to be that it's gonna be lighter weight, less fragile. And this is a big one because I think that a lot of times people want to print things in resin, but and they're going to be a lot less prone to breaking, especially if you drop it or something like that. And also, especially as you get into those bigger pieces, materials are going to be a little bit less expensive generally. But resin also has its pros for cosplay applications. Obviously, you're going to be able to achieve a much higher level of detail than you would with filament deposition. And this is really great for costumes, especially since they have really intricate pieces. Like maybe they have little emblems, maybe you're even printing like chainmail or scale mail or things like that. And their pro is that there's usually less post-processing. So once they get off the print bed, resin is going to have a lot less visible layer lines typically. So you're going to have to do a lot less sanding, filling before you get to the painting stage, which is a big plus for costumes. And another one that I don't see people talking about very often is that you can print very clear things with resin as opposed to FDM. They do make like, translucent, transparent, quote unquote filaments, but you're not going to be able to achieve that light clear level that you will with resin. I've seen people print all kinds of helmet visors and things with resin. They take it off the print bed, they're going to sand and polish it down, and then give it a spray of clear coat, and it literally looks like glass or clear plastic. So that's definitely something to take into account if you're working on. So the next thing I want to talk about, and this is one of the most asked questions I get on all of my pages, which is about scaling. How do you scale a model so that it's going to be the size that's going to either fit your body or it's going to be the right proportion to you once it's all printed out? So I'm going to talk about a couple of different methods that you can try and talk about pros and cons of each. So number one, and you might have seen people do this before, where you print a paper copy of your object, print it out, scale, assemble it, tape it together, and actually hold it up so that you can see how it's going to look against your body. And this is a really good option for props, especially if you're doing like those big, crazy, like anime, comic props, swords, etc. But this picture I have here is actually a digital reference. You can do the same thing if you don't want to waste all the paper and tape. You can do it digitally. So what I did here is I just took a photo of myself, and then I basically went into Photoshop and I scaled the object to however big I want it to be once it's printed out. So as an example, I have a magic sword here, but you can do kind of a proportion. So I know that I'm 66 inches tall, and if this object in Photoshop is about 85% of my height, I know that the finished product has to be about 55 inches tall. That's a really cool way to do scaling for, especially for props, and it doesn't require a lot of fancy tools or materials. Number two would be printing what I call a test slice. And this works really well for things that can be fitted to your body, so armor or helmets. And basically, what I like to do is just print out maybe a centimeter, half a centimeter of whatever object I'm making at the point I'm trying to measure. So, for example, for a helmet, I want to print the opening. So that's just the bottom of the helmet that I printed about a centimeter of. I actually have it here. I don't know if you guys can see me on the webcam. But basically, what you do is you just print out this test slice, and then you can put it over your head and make sure that it's going to fit over you, your nose, your mouth, all of the widest points. And this is a really good option to be able to see your object without printing the entire thing. Because I think if anybody has done something like this before, you've probably tried to print something and then it's the wrong scale and you've just wasted 9, 10 more hours of your life. So this is a cool little trick that I like to do. Number three, and I would say of the options, this is one that's going to require the most equipment, technical knowledge, and this would be doing 3D scans. So there are lots of companies that make high-end handheld 3D scanners that you can use, and I have a third picture there where you can see it's something that you hold and you move around an object, and you can actually create a digital model that way. But if you are not ready to invest in something like that, and I honestly think that for most people, it's not a tool that you really need in your workshop, there are apps that do this. So the app that I'm showing over here on the left in the first picture is called Scandy Pro, and it's an app, and I think it's only on iOS. I don't know if it's on Android. I'm an Apple person, but basically it uses LiDAR, so it's for any iPhone 10 or newer, I believe. And what it does is it uses the true depth front facing camera to turn your phone into a 3D scanner. And this middle picture here is a 3D scan that I made within the app. So what you do basically is you put your hair up into a really tight ponytail, like a headband if you have like bangs and stuff, and then have a friend scan around your head, and you can actually create an STL of your head that way. And then, of course, you can upload that into Fusion or Blender or whatever program you are using and actually size your cosplay pieces that way. So, oh, and then also I forgot to put this on the slide, but there is a program called Armorsmith Designer. It costs $40, I think now. It used to be 30, but I think it's 40 now. And you can create a virtual avatar of yourself within that software and size your models on your virtual avatar that way. It's not going to be as precise as getting an actual scan of yourself, obviously, but it's still a really good option. I think that's all I have about my whole scaling spiel. This is the fun part of my workshop. I really wanted to do a live demo of the entire post-processing methods that I use, because this is the question that I get the most on my channels. And it is something that I see people struggling with often. So let me actually, okay, yeah, I guess first I'll talk about the whole process overall. So post-processing, for anybody who's unfamiliar, is basically everything that you are doing to a 3D print after it comes off the build. Early, you're going to fill in the layer lines, priming, and then you can get into all the fun stuff like painting, weathering, and finishing it any other ways that you would like. So I am not sure if anybody printed out the test STL that I sent out to May earlier. But basically, if you have it, you can go ahead and follow along. If you don't, then just watch and feel free to interrupt me for any questions. But the STL that I sent out to you guys is this little knee armor piece. And this is just printed in PLA, 0.2 millimeter layer height. You can hear the layers on it when I scratch it. And I just wanted to have you guys print this as a very basic shape test piece. Let me walk you guys through what we are going to do to get this ready for painting. So actually first, let me move my camera to have a little bit of a better angle. We are going to do, once it comes off the build plate, is of course remove any supports that you have on here. And you might have these rough edges from the parts that we're interfacing with the support. And if they're really bad, what I like to do is basically just take a file and file it down. That can help you save a lot of time before jumping right into the sandpaper. But mine here is actually not that bad. So I'm just going to jump right into sanding. So I like to start, if you're using PLA, I like to start with something kind of high grit, something between like 80 to 120. I think that that's going to be a really good place to start for most people. And yeah, I should have opened this up before. Okay, so I think that the thing that people dread the most about 3D printing is the sanding part of it. And if you are doing a bigger piece than something like this, I do recommend getting an orbital sander. Let me actually show you guys the one that I have. I have the Rigid brand one. Basically looks like this. You have these different sanding pads that like Velcro on. And these are really useful if you're doing big cosplay pieces like breastplates, back plates, anything that's, you know, bigger than this knee pad. You might want something to help you cut down on time a little bit. Especially if you're using an orbital sander or something like that, you definitely don't want to stay in one place too long because you can go through the plastic. It could end up melting or getting gummy or just going right straight through to the infill. But I'm going to show you what I do, and I actually don't do as much sanding as maybe some other people do. Basically, what I'm trying to do right now is just sand down any really rough parts, any aberrations in the printing, anything that is just really sticking up. I like to focus on the edges a lot. And this is 120, by the way. You can definitely start with something like 80 or 100 though, if that's what you have on hand. Oh, and actually I totally forgot to mention, so this is PLA, but this was actually printed in something called CosPLA, made by Polymaker, and it's basically a PLA that has a slightly higher degree of sandability and a little bit of a higher melting point as well. So when you're sanding with something like an orbital sander, there's less risk of it melting and getting gummy on you. But they do make, there are a lot of brands out there that make cosplay specific filaments or filaments that are specifically made for sanding. So this looks pretty good. It's hard to see on camera, but basically just, I haven't sanded too much, just roughed it up a little bit. I'm gonna do this corner a little bit more actually. So this was the 120. I'm just gonna hit it super quick with some 220, slightly finer grits. But as you can see, I'm not really doing a ton of sanding. I'm literally just using 2 different grits, moving pretty fast here. So I'm actually gonna say that is all the sanding I'm gonna do. You guys can see here, I have sanded down just the higher layer lines, any parts of the piece that were a little bit rough, especially around the edges. But you can still definitely see the layer lines. You can still hear them if you scratch it. But so the next step is the step that I mentioned I'm going to use some acetone in. This is my favorite method for smoothing prints of any kind, mostly because the materials are very inexpensive, it's very easy to do, and cleanup is generally pretty easy. What I like to do is take some wood filler. I really like this brand, the DAP plastic wood, but there are all kinds of wood fillers that can work. This is the Gorilla brand kind. Basically, any wood filler that is going to be water soluble, this will work with, which is most wood fillers. And you can also do this method with other substrates as well. I have done it with Bondo Spot Putty, that red stuff that smells really bad. You can do it with Liquitex modeling paste. You can do it with other kinds of auto body fillers. The reason I like the plastic wood is because, one, it's pretty cheap. You can just get this at Home Depot. I think this thing is like $4 or something. And it's non-toxic. I am going to wear gloves with it just to keep it not super messy, but it's non-toxic and you can just clean it up with water. If you are going to do the same exact process with something like Bondo Spot Putty, you have to clean it with acetone or another solvent. So that's just kind of the reason why I suggest plastic wood, especially for beginners. There are pros and cons to each. Plastic wood is not the hardest material. So if you are filling in like a big chunk and it gets like hit on a corner, it might dent or chip. But for just filling in layer lines like this, honestly, pretty much any material you are using as your substrate is going to give you a similar result. So I'm going to show you guys with the plastic wood. Do you have scissors? Sorry, I need a pair of scissors to open this. But so what you're going to do is just take your wood filler, Bondo, whatever you're using. If you are using Bondo, make sure to be wearing a respirator because the fumes are pretty nasty. But I am just using wood filler right here. I'll start with the acetone just for time's sake. So this is just acetone that I got at Home Depot. You don't really want to use nail polish remover because it is not the same concentration. It's not pure acetone, it's watered down. But basically you're just going to take like maybe, I don't know, that's like a couple tablespoons of acetone. Thank you. And then you're going to take your wood filler or Bondo or whatever you're using, and you are going to put enough in here to create what I like to call kind of a melted ice cream consistency. I know it's very scientific, but all the substrates you're using are going to have slightly different consistencies. So that's why I just like to kind of say you're aiming for melted ice cream. So let's start with that first. I'm going to mix this up with a paintbrush, and I can already tell I'm going to need more wood filler. And also, it doesn't matter what color wood filler you do. I just like to use the white because it's like nice and pretty, but they have like the natural color, they have red, whatever you can get your hands on. And what we are aiming for here is to hopefully have like no chunks. We want this to go on nice and smooth. And we are going to use this mixture to paint onto our piece and fill in some layer lines. And this is going to give you a super smooth, beautiful surface that you are going to be able to prime and then paint whatever on, and it's going to come out super smooth. So we're just mixing it up here. We don't want any chunks. And this is getting to about the consistency that I want. Let's see. And the reason I use acetone here instead of just water, because honestly, you could just use water here, but I don't recommend it. The reason I like the acetone is because it dries off really quickly. And so you can build it up in multiple layers very quickly. And I just find that it sticks to your print a little bit better. And by the way, you can use this method for any material that you're using. You could even use this on resin prints if you really wanted. But this is my favorite layer line filling technique. Other people, I've seen people paint on UV resin and fill in their layer lines that way. I've pretty much tried everything, and this is just what I like the best. I like that it doesn't have any toxic fumes, affordable, and just very easy to do and consistent. So this looks good. See, we have our melted ice cream, delicious soup. So what we're gonna do is just take our piece and we're going to paint it on. And I'm painting this in the direction of the layer lines. I just find that helps it sync between them a little bit better. And as you can see, as I'm painting this, the first ones I did, like here, are already drying. And that's what I like about the acetone. Just paint it on. And as it's drying, I'm going to do 2 layers, maybe 3 in some places if it's looking kind of rough. You can see it's literally already drying. And like I said, like this bucket and stuff later, you can just wash with water. If you're using something like Bondo, you will need to use acetone or another cleaning solvent. But we're just keeping it nice and easy today. I'm also going to build some up on the edges where I can see the layer lines. Does not have to be pretty because we are going to sand this down. Laura says, some people have also used spray-on primer too, from what I've heard. So I'm actually going to use primer next. Primer, even the really high build filler primers, even auto stuff, it's going to take multiple layers to fill in the layer lines and actually get you a really nice smooth surface. So you can jump right from sanding to primer, but I much prefer to do filling before the primer step. And it actually, I've found, gives you a much smoother surface in the end. I will show you guys in a second. You guys are going to be like, oh my gosh, that's so smooth. But so I just painted on pretty much 2 layers here, and it's already drying pretty nicely. But I'm just gonna let that dry for literally maybe 2 minutes, and then it will be ready to sand. Um, and if you made too much filler solution like I did, and you don't have any more pieces that you're working on right now, you can just save this in an airtight Tupperware. As long as the acetone can't evaporate, you can just re-stir this next time you're working and use it again. And I do recommend putting this on with a paintbrush. I just find that that's the easiest way to deposit that all on. One more minute. But as you can see, it's literally already 80% dry. If you were doing this with water, it would take a couple hours to dry, but the acetone just flashes off so quick. While we're waiting for that to dry, I will talk to you about some of the primers, as Laura mentioned, that I like to use. Today, I'm going to be using the Rust-Oleum Auto Filler Primer. I really like this stuff because, again, it's affordable. You guys can see a theme here. I really like affordable stuff. It's wet sandable. So after Michelle loves it. It's honestly, you can find this at Home Depot. I think it's at Walmart too. It's very accessible. It's wet sandable. So after you spray it on and it's dry, you can sand it with water and wet sandpaper, and you're going to be able to get a really nice, really glassy, smooth finish and very low dust in your workshop, which is always a plus. But I love this stuff. I also really like, I don't think I have an empty can to show you guys, but Duplicolor is another great brand. It's also wet sandable. So once you spray it on, you can wet sand it, no problem. But yeah, I would recommend going with a filler primer instead of just a straight primer, because filler is actually going to build within any gaps and help create that really nice smooth surface. Let's get into our second round of sanding. And once again, the wood filler that I'm using is non-toxic, but I just don't want to get the mess everywhere, so I'm going to use a glove. And this, I'm just going back in with my literal same piece of 220 sandpaper, and this is going to be so easy to sand down. Basically, you're just going to go in, circular motions. I'm not pressing hard at all. At this stage, I really don't recommend using an orbital or other kind of power sander because you aren't going to need it. You're not going to need that much power. So we're just going in here, and let me show you. I am not pushing down too hard. I don't want to sand down too far that you can start to see the layer lines poking back through. You should basically just like almost be touching the top of the layer lines. Going in circular motions. And you really don't need to do anything finer than 220 here. And I would honestly, I think a good spot for this. I wouldn't go bigger because you don't want to rip out too much of that filler you just put in. I think 220 is a pretty good spot. And this, of course, also works for more intricate detailed pieces. This is like a pretty basic piece. It's just flat, pretty much. But for more intricate pieces, you would just need to take your time, go in with smaller pieces of sandpaper, with files. But for demonstration purposes, we have our little knee armor piece. And I've only been working on this second round of sanding for like probably 2 minutes now. And I'm almost done, I think. Just want to make sure I get all the pieces. Make sure you get the edges as well. So you can see here, this piece is actually super smooth now. It's hard to see it on camera, but once we put the filler primer on this, it's going to look like blank. You're not going to see any layer lines whatsoever. Fix apart a little bit. All right. And remember, if you are using wood filler, this stuff is water soluble, so you don't want to run a wet paper towel on this to get the dust off. If you are using Bondo or something like that, you can do that. You can run it underwater to get all the dust off. But with wood filler, I just like to go in with a paper towel, actually, dry paper towel, and just wipe it off. Okay. So, and right now we are not caring about the back of this. That's just, we're not caring. We're just looking at the front. Okay. So this is all sanded down. The surface is super smooth and we are ready for some filler primer. I wanted to show this whole spray process to you in my workshop. I normally spray outside, but I wanted to show you guys in my workshop. So let's walk over here. And this is honestly, if you guys are at home and you're in a garage space or something, you can set up a spray booth just like this. And this is basically just a box that I cut like kind of the top off, and I'm going to be spraying into the box. I am going to put my mask on for this because, of course, we don't want paint fumes going in our lungs. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my filler primer. This is the Rust-Oleum one that I showed you guys earlier. I'm going to give it a good shake, and I'm going to spray on multiple very light coats. You don't want to just saturate this thing until it's dripping. Because one, that's going to take forever to dry. Two, you're going to get paint drips. It's much better just do multiple small layers. All right, so let me put my mask on. I'm actually going to glove up again too. And then once I'm done spraying this, we'll give it a second to dry. The stuff actually dries extremely fast as well. But once it's dry, I'll show you guys the finished product, and then I will answer any questions you guys have about the whole process. So I just gave this a couple of very light coats. And as you can see, I wasn't staying in one spot too long. That's how you get paint drips. I was just going back and forth really lightly. And I tried to get all the edges. On a piece like this, what I would ideally do is now, once it was dry, flip it over and do the other side just to make sure I got all the edges. But for demonstration purposes, this was pretty good. And like I said, with this primer, it is wet sandable. So if you did get paint drips or something like that, you could wait for it to be totally dry, get out your water and wet sandpaper, sand down the drip and spray it again. I'm actually going to give this one more coat. I see a spot that I totally missed. And this is the good thing too about doing the filler primer step, is that you can really see any imperfections from your previous steps. It's hard to see it when you have pieces showing through and different colors of primer and dust and all that stuff, but once you do the filler primer, it really does reveal everything. So I see a little spot where I missed the primer, so I'm just going to do that real quick once again. Now fully covered, I'm going to let that dry in there for like a couple minutes before it's not fully dry, but dry enough that I can handle it. So I will bring you guys back over to my little spot. Okay. So while we're waiting for that to dry, and I show you guys the final results, thank you guys so much for watching my workshop. Yeah, I hope that I touched on some things that people were curious about, and I'm super excited to see your guys' projects. And yeah, that's it from me. Thank you guys so much. Have a good night or morning or middle of the night, whatever. Thank you guys, and I can't wait to see your projects.